You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball each and every weekday. And this episode is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. And unfortunately, just a couple hours ago, learned of some sad news that former Missouri football coach Warren Powers has passed away at the age of 80. And you know what? As that happened, I happened to see an old friend of mine, Jennings, tweet about how he was the producer for the Warren Powers Coaches Show back in 1979. So you know what? I thought Jay would be the perfect guy to bring on for a quick episode of Locked On Mizzou. Jay is, quite frankly, a videographer extraordinaire, a journalist, a documentarian. Guy's just had a really interesting career over in the Raleigh area, WRAL, North Carolina, for, decades now. He's shot just all kinds of interesting stuff, from massive sporting events like the '83 NC State Wolfpack, winning the national championship, covering Michael Jordan during his time with the Tar Heels, all that good stuff. So you know what, Jay? Most importantly, just a really good guy. And we have a really good conversation. So you know what? Without further ado, I want to get into my conversation about Mizzou football, Warren Powers, the 1970s Missouri Tiger football team. All of this and more coming up right now.
Like I was at Notre Dame in, was it 71? I think it was 71, 72 when they upset Notre Dame. Let's see. Hey, hang on. I'm 3 clicks away from making that happen.
Well, they definitely upset them in 78 for sure in South Bend. That was the 3-0 game.
I'm 2-0 at South Bend. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's impressive. I don't think too many people can beat that.
Notre Dame, it was 72. They went to Notre Dame after getting just manhandled at Nebraska the week before, 62-zip, and then beat number 8 Notre Dame.
Well, that was kind of the Mizzou in the 1970s, wasn't it? Just up and down.
That was Uncle Al. I mean, that was, Al's deal was he could beat anybody, he could lose to anybody, and he was always losing to Kansas, and that's what cost him his job.
I was going to say the Kansas ones in particular cost Al Onofrio his job for sure. I would say, but of course Warren Powers, who unfortunately we learned just died, apparently maybe today in the last couple days, passed away at age 80 after a long battle with Alzheimer's. Definitely Powers probably best known as Missouri's head coach, of course, from 78 to 1984. But you know what? Even though he was a Kansas City native, he actually ended up playing for Bob Devaney at the University of Nebraska. Of course, was an assistant under Devaney and Tom Osborne as well before, coming back to his home state of Missouri and, of course, being the Mizzou coach. Now, Jay just gave us a bit of trivia that he's 2-0 in South Bend. Well, I want to give you a bit of Warren Powers trivia that I found really interesting.
Okay. Let's
so for
hear it.
one season, he was actually the head coach at the University of Washington State before coming to Mizzou. And in that one season, guess what he did? He knocked off the number 14 Nebraska Cornhuskers, his alma mater, in Lincoln. Well, guess what happened the following season, Jay? 78, Powers takes down the Huskers in Lincoln once again for the University of Missouri. So if you can find me another coach that's won 2 years in a row in Lincoln, I'd like to see it.
That's good because, even, the Switzer teams would not have won 2 in a row.
Right, because they didn't play 2 years in a row. That's my point. Right. You'd have to almost change teams or something, and to be that good or to even play them, it just seems like that's one of those truly unbreakable records.
That's
right?
good. I do know that there was a period of time somewhere around, I think it was around 80 or so. You're the Locked On guy. You would have to find out for me where, Mizzou always played Nebraska and Oklahoma both at home or both away, and then there was a scheduling change by the old Big Eight where they staggered those. So there's a possibility when they restaggered those schedules that might have happened. But I think you're right. I think Coach Powers probably is. That's a short list.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You're right. Certainly in '78 they played Nebraska and Oklahoma on the road that year. And yeah, the Oklahoma game didn't go nearly as well, but just a lot of craziness in that '78 season. I mean, kind of, again, just a continuation of the Onofrio era in a lot of ways. Missouri beats number 5 Notre Dame at South Bend once again 3-0. Then, oh yeah, no problem. Hey, just turn around and play Alabama the next week. No big deal, right? I mean, can you believe the scheduling back then?
And so here's the crazy. It's even crazier than that. Notre Dame was the defending national champion. So in essence, they were ranked number 5 coming into the season, but you're really playing number one,
right?
First 2 weeks, and
then you played number 1 in week 4. Oklahoma was then number 1 after, I guess, Alabama had been upset at some point too. So it's unbelievable. It really is.
Well, let me just tell you, there was so much excitement around Mizzou football that fall of '78 when Coach Powers came in. And I think there were high expectations. Mizzou was always in that role in the Big Eight of, they were always nudging OU and Nebraska for to try to get into those top 2 spots, and we're always just on the outside. And I think there was a lot of excitement when Powers came that they might just do it. And when they beat Dan Devine and Joe Montana 3-0 in that opener at South Bend, and I can't believe, because I was there covering it for KOMU. When they came home that next week to play number 1 Alabama with Bear Bryant, I mean, Faroe was rocking. I'm looking at the attendance now. Get this, folks, if you're not familiar with those days, Mizzou, 73,655 people were at Faroe. That was actually the first year that they'd added that end zone to the south.
Right.
Which is now where the big football complex is.
Yes.
But that was the first season that they'd had that. And so they were, every home game when it was a big opponent, they were just setting a new attendance record. It was crazy. It was crazy.
And quickly, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks, who is the leader in college sports, daily fantasy. But of course, if you like pro sports even better, well, guess what? LeBron and Patrick Mahomes and all those, and some soccer players too, I guess, if you're into that sort of thing. Well, you know what? They got it all over at prizepicks.com. Any type of prop you can possibly think of, I'm sure they have it for you, because again, they are the leader in propositions, making daily fantasy easy. So go to prizepicks.com or download from your app store. Be sure to use the promo code Locked On, because when you do, you'll receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Once again, for that deposit match, just use the promo code Locked On. So don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com. That's right. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And by McDonald's, who is proudly bringing you this episode of Locked On Mizzou and has been proudly serving customers since 1965. And I tell you, this is not a joke. I just went to McDonald's this morning, stayed up a little bit too late last night doing some projects. No, I'm not hungover, nothing like that, but dang it, when you're feeling a little bit tired, a little bit something, you need to quench your yourself with some McDonald's. That's my advice. The bacon, egg, and cheese, the sausage and cheese, the sausage biscuit. Oh, my God. It's hard to beat. It really is. In fact, I might get another one right now. But I tell you what, get on down to McDonald's where, again, not only a place for great food, but a great place to reconnect with your friends, your family, your team, whatever it might be. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Yeah, and just to your point about how exciting that particular season was, you look at the rest of the non-conference schedule. Ole Miss and Illinois weren't particularly good that season, but still, you're talking about really interesting opponents, at least compared to what you play in 2021. That's for sure, Jay. But, you mentioned you covered that 78 Notre Dame game for KOMU. I saw on Twitter, and this is actually why I reached out to you. I saw you said in 79, you actually produced the coach's show for Warren Powers. And I thought maybe you could just provide us a little bit of insight on what kind of guy Warren Powers really was and what was that whole experience like for you?
Well, Coach Powers was he was very much an old school, matter of fact football coach. He did come out of the Bob Devaney school, and most of his, I'd say most, a good chunk of his assistants on that Missouri staff were former Nebraska guys. As a matter of fact, not only did I work for KOMU and covered them, and then also worked as the producer on the coaches show, but actually the previous year in 78, I was around him a good bit then because I was working as a camera operator for football practice. So I was up in the tower. Okay. Up in the tower shooting a 16
the old 22 footage. Yeah.
Exactly. But anyway, Coach Powers was very matter of fact. He, a no nonsense guy. I mean, he was pleasant to be around. But when he showed up he made the drive out Highway 63 to the Big 8, there just outside of Como. He was there just like he was on the sides. He was there to do a job. He came in, sat down, mic'd up, and actually Jim Bakken, the former Cardinals kicker, the former Big Red kicker, was the host of the show. And it was actually
talking the football Cardinals, of course.
Football Cardinals, yeah. It was Bakken's first chance to be on television. And so it was really interesting. And so you've got this, I was 21 years old. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And actually probably of all the guys there, Powers probably had more TV experience than Bakken and I had combined going in. But he was great. I remember my struggle was I had to remember that the coaches show, and for those who aren't familiar with what especially the coaches TV shows were in those days, it was a recruiting device. They'd come on, they play the highlights of the school, of your most recent game, and it was a place for the fans, for Mizzou fans, to watch the highlights because very few games were on TV back in the day. I mean, right. I'm looking at it. I think in 79, I don't think there was, other than the bowl game, I don't think there was a game that was on. I don't know if there was a game on TV. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, we mentioned that 78 Nebraska game. That actually was nationally televised. It just happened to be because, number one, Nebraska was number 2 in the country. So they happened to be one of the few teams that would get a semi-regular national TV appearance. But you're absolutely right. Even as deep into the, late 90s, early 2000s, for all you youngins out there, even the Gary Pinkel, Larry Smith coaches shows were, a lot of times it was, half your games, if not more, were still on the radio, especially as a Mizzou fan. So, the coaches show was a must watch to actually see the highlights of the games. You'd have people like Jay Jennings with a camera on their shoulder, and they'd get you the highlights of the games that way. Totally old school, different time for sure.
So that's how, if you're a Mizzou fan, you're listening to the games on the radio, whether you grew up listening to Malin Aldrich, you're doing play-by-play, and later guys like Bob Costas did play-by-play. John Rooney, who's now doing the Cardinals. John was actually the one doing play-by-play for Mizzou, and also Dan Kelly, the Blues longtime play-by-play guy, came over and did Mizzou for a season. But anyway, so you have these coaches shows. And so I'm going to J school, but I'm working on a coach's show. I had to learn that you can't approach a coach's show with journalism.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm putting together highlights.
That's an interesting lesson to learn as a 21-year-old or whatever you are.
And I kind of learned it the hard way. I can't remember. Let's see. It would have been, pardon me while I look at it probably was the Texas game when they lost week 4, number 4 Texas came in. Darryl Royal was still the coach for UT at the time. And they came in number 4, highly ranked. And they actually put a whooping on Mizzou, 21-0 at Faroe. And, I edit the highlights as if they are, I'm doing the highlights for KOMU.
Right.
I'm showing Texas plays. I'm showing,
sure.
And I remember Coach Powers watching the highlights and turning to this and goes, this isn't the Longhorn show.
Right.
This is the Missouri Tiger show. And so I learned, okay, I don't need to make sure that.
Right. You don't have to show every interception, Jay.
Yeah. You don't show all the runs in the Texas 70-yard drive.
Right. Yeah. You don't question Coach Powers' coach management or time clock management, any of that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my lesson there. And that was my only little dust up with him. But it was, once I kind of understood this is what we're doing.
And we are brought to you by BuiltBar.com. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market, in my humble opinion. And you know what? They just sent me a new flavor, blueberry muffin. Once again, Built Bar has done it. They've made yet another tasty, chewable chocolate protein bar. Unlike a lot of the other bars in this marketplace, it's not chalky or just hard to chew or frankly just not appetizing to put down your mouth. That's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for a nice treat that isn't going to make us feel guilty. Or guess what? That's exactly what Built Bar is, because not only are they tasty, they're low carb, low cal, low fat, low sugar, and high in protein. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Once again, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And by BetOnline.ag, where, frankly, they thought 37.5, you know what, not quite enough. We're going to need to up that to 38 for this Missouri-Georgia game. Yes, the Bulldogs now giving 38 points, despite the fact that the total is under 60. A 58.5 point total. Yikes. Not exactly predicting good things for the Tigers on Saturday, are my friends at betonline.ag. But you know what? If you think they're all wet, if you think they're wrong, and you want to take those 38 points, well, take your money, put it where your mouth is. Go to betonline.ag. And when you do, be sure to use the promo code LOCKEDON, because you will get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Once again, promo code LOCKEDON for your 50% welcome bonus at BetOnline, where the game starts. I just like hearing that even 42 years ago that head coaches were still kind of control freaks about the media and just the messaging and everything else.
A football coach is a football coach is a football coach, man. You know,
I was going to say, some things never change. That's for darn sure.
Absolutely.
So, not to go back to this 78 game, but it's just such a famous game, that Nebraska game. And, I just wondered if you have any specific memories from that game. I was obviously, this was before my time, but I've gone back and watched that football game, and the sort of indelible image of that game is James Wilder, late fourth quarter, Missouri running back, just absolutely mauling a Nebraska defender in the middle of the field, running him over for the game-clinching touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown. That's what I remember from it. What are your memories, Jay?
If it makes you feel any better, John, that's what I remember. I was actually on the sidelines that day. It was a rainy, cold, kind of drizzly, kind of classic Midwestern late November day. And that game was going back and forth. It was a wild punch, counter punch, counter punch. And just when you thought the other, it was like Rocky IV or something. You didn't think the other team was going to get up off the mat. They would get up once again. But when on that play, when Wilder goes through that hole, and I wish I could remember who the linebacker for Nebraska was who stood him up. He sticks him hard. And Wilder just takes his right hand, grabs him by the jersey, and throws him to the ground and rumbles into the end zone. And I remember I was with my good buddy Wesley Goforth from KOMU, and we just kind of looked at each other like, what in the world just happened? The Sykeston train rolled again, man. That guy was something else. I really do think that James Wilder kind of gets lost in the shuffle of discussions of great Missouri running backs because, he played in an era when they ran the veer. So the carries were really spread out a lot. And they had three guys who ended up playing in the NFL. Gary Ellison and Earl Gant both played in the NFL. So you don't have some guy getting 1,600 yards. You've got three guys splitting about, each getting about 800 to 900 yards. So, but Wilder was fantastic.
Yeah, and you had some other really good notable offensive teammates as well, of course. I mean, obviously the NFL Hall of Famer Kellen Winslow had 6 catches for 132 yards in that game. By the way, of course, Phil Bradley, a quarterback, was an all Big 8 caliber kind of player. And, Leo Lewis at receiver, the Hickman grad for all you Columbia people out there. So, I mean, that team was really loaded with talent. It just goes to show you, not every 8-4 season is created equally. That's for sure. That was an unbelievable team and an exciting season.
And if you remember, for those Mizzou fans that remember, I believe the entire secondary played in the NFL.
Wow.
Eric Wright had a tremendous career with San Francisco.
I actually knew Eric Wright back in the day. He worked with my mom when he worked for Larry Smith that era. So yeah, I remember Eric Wright well. Cool. Yeah,
mm-hmm. It was just that team was loaded, and they had defensively, Chris Garlick at linebacker. He was all Big 8, and a guy I played high school football against, that guy named Billy Bess, who's from Flat River Central. He was the other linebacker. So it was that team was, man, it was stacked. Now you look back on it and you go, well, how did they only go? What were they 8-4? You're going, right. How they only go 8-4. Now you look at the talent on the team, you're going, wow, they could have been 10-1. And you look at the games and you probably could have been.
Finished strong, though, 48-0 over Kansas. Of course, the Nebraska victory. And then finishing it off with a Liberty Bowl victory over LSU. So, yeah, strong finish to the season. Tigers finished 15th in the AP poll, the final one. So, you know what, Jay, just really quickly, thanks so much for coming on once again, number one. I noticed you've got that signed Gary Pinkel helmet there in the background. Very nice. The videographer extraordinaire, Jason Jennings, he knows the mise en scene, everybody. He understands how all that works. But seriously, though, I know you're out there in North Carolina, so you're a little bit further removed maybe from the noise as I am here in Columbia. What are your feelings about this current Mizzou football program? Do you feel like we're still going in the right direction?
I do. I think it's been hard this year, especially obviously defensively. Stopping the run has just been it's been they haven't done it.
Yeah.
I'm afraid for the Tiger defense this weekend against Georgia. I was telling
I'm afraid for the offense too, quite frankly. I'm afraid
I am.
That Georgia defense is awfully good.
Without a doubt. But Georgia may not throw the ball 10 times.
They might not have to.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they literally don't have to throw it once and they'd win. I mean, I hate to say that.
I think you're right. I think, but I back to the state of the program, as far as like the run defense in general, I think the pass defense is solid. I think the running defense obviously has been a big problem. They lost a couple of their interior guys who went south with Coach Odom to Arkansas. That hurt. They lost a couple guys to graduation. Now I've had a couple guys get hurt. Another guy entered the transfer portal. And, Nick Bolton to the NFL doesn't exactly help your defense. And I just think you throw in Steve Wilkes and his new system, and, they've had problems with missed tackles. They've had problems with assignments and getting lined up. I hope they get better defensively. I really do. But, it would really help the defense if the offense could stay on the field at key moments in the game. But I really do think, I think Coach Drinkwitz is, I really do think he's the guy for the time. I think he's assembling a great staff. And clearly, here's the thing. In any conference in FBS, Power 5 or Group of 5, you got to have players, man. You got to have players. And that he's going out and getting players. And I think, as what's the old saying? It's nice to have X's and O's, but what you really need are Jimmys and Joes.
Yep, that's the old cliche.
And that's and I think he's got a solid staff. It's interesting. I've got a lot of buddies here actually know him because from his time at NC State.
Sure.
He apparently was in a Bible study group with a couple of friends of mine. So
okay.
I've kind of become a fan at a distance, and knew him before he got the job. But I think he's the right guy. But it's they need to steal at least one win down the stretch, I think. Don't you?
Yeah, that would, honestly, I don't think they need to. It would sure be nice.
Right. I guess that's a better way of putting it. Yeah, it would be better.
The truth is, of course, I'm a diehard Mizzou fan. I live and die with every snap. So, I'm a very emotional Mizzou fan in the moment. So I have to remind myself, and I guess all my listeners too, to take a bigger picture look. In all seriousness, I think getting Luther Burden, that receiver from St. Louis, the number one receiver in the country, that's worth 2 or 3 wins in this particular regular season almost. I mean, it's in terms of just impact. And also, John, I think getting Burden, and it keeps everybody else around.
Yeah, keep getting Burden to commit, and Sam Horn, the quarterback from Georgia, 4-star quarterback, to double down on a week that they lost. Right. That doesn't turn an L into a W, but it sure makes it gives you a more of a positive feeling moving forward.
Sure. I think if you saw guys like him or the big defensive lineman, Marquise Grayshiel, who's Alabama's been looking at him, all of these guys seem to still be solidly committed to Missouri. Now, if you saw a bunch of these guys starting to flip or decommit, I would genuinely be worried at that point, because that's what a lot of the Drinkwitz era has been about. That's what a lot of the sort of bullish take has been as well. Like you say, we're going to get more talent over time. Right. If that ever flips, then it's time to get worried. But
I agree.
The truth is you've got to give it a little bit more time, a little bit more patience for that to sort of bear fruit.
And John, don't you think too that Mizzou is until things would change, they're always going to be a school that once they get guys verbally committed, that's just going to put a target on not only Mizzou but those players, that if those guys rise in the recruiting rankings, Bama,
especially
LSU,
early in the
Texas,
process,
they're going to come poaching, man.
Of course. And, you saw it with Burden, even though obviously he was an Oklahoma commit, but, a lot of times a really early commitment isn't necessarily worth a whole lot. You've got a whole, year, 6 months, however long it is to essentially keep recruiting a guy. And most guys don't decommit twice, but one decommitment has almost become the regular for some people at this point. Certainly not unusual. Let's put it that way.
And throw in the transfer portal.
And then there's the old portal as well. Another opportunity to start the recruitment process all over again. It's just a big look at me thing, isn't it?
And we say all that, and to me that's one of the things. And here I am. I'm playing the old man, telling everybody to get off my lawn.
I can't wait.
But that's one of the things I love about Tyler Beatty. Here's a guy who a couple of different times could have said, guys, it's been great.
Sure.
And I'm gonna go somewhere else and see my success at another school. And, here's a guy who just, I've never met him, but all reports are he's a great young man who's kind of old school in his thinking. And, I'm just going to outwork the living daylights. I'm going to grow where I'm planted, and I'm going to stick with my commitment. So you got to love you some Tyler Beatty, especially when he's knocking on the doors of 1,000 at this point in the season. So, and I will say this. If he goes over 1,000 this coming weekend, because where does he stand at this point, John?
I don't know off the top of my head. He's around that. He's at 9 something, I think.
Yeah, I think it's 9, somewhere in the low to mid 9s. If somehow he's able to get that Georgia defense go over 1,000, I'm not going to guarantee it's a victory, but I'm going to say that was a pretty good weekend in Athens.
Okay, well, he's at 989, so hopefully he can get 11 yards.
Well, we'll see.
But yeah, against Georgia, I was going to say it's no guarantee. I hate to say it, even as good as Tyler is. But, I think that's a great note to go out on, Jay. I think that's a really good take, too. I'd never totally thought about that. We tend to think of quarterbacks, for instance, maybe not getting the playing time and entering the transfer portal pretty quickly. But, yeah, you just look at the amount of touches that Beatty has gotten this season compared to previous seasons when, of course, Larry Roundtree was your workhorse. Yeah, good for him for sticking around. And it's great to see that sort of patience and old school mentality, like you said, pay off for the kid.
So let me turn into the interviewer here at this point.
Oh, please do.
As a longtime Mizzou observer, where do you rank Beatty in the list of running backs? We've talked about a lot of them today. We talked about Wilder. We've talked about, Roundtree. And I mean, where do you put let's just say in the SEC era, where would you put it?
See, that's funny. I actually threw that poll out just yesterday, SEC era running backs. And that's a tough one. And I actually think because of the passing game productivity for Beatty, and I think you have to factor in, I think a lot of people will look at maybe his rushing yards per carry, compare that to Henry Josie, for instance. Well, you got to remember Josie played in front of a much better offensive line, especially in 2013.
Right.
That's got to be the best offensive line in Missouri history. You got 4 guys who played legit time in the NFL, and then a 5th guy, Max Copeland, who was a really good college player. So to me, you got to factor all that in, but I'm really a type of guy. This is my own bias. I love a running back who can catch the ball, who can make things happen in the screen game, out of the backfield on a Texas route, something like that. Mm-hmm. To me, that's Tyler Beatty. So I would take him probably over everyone. And God, Henry Josie's one of my favorite players in Mizzou history. So that's hard for me to say, but Beatty's really won me over this past season.
I know it's apples to oranges. But to me, there is a comparison there between Beatty and Josie, size wise and style wise. They're similar running backs.
I agree.
But I think there's also a perseverance factor for both of those guys. Obviously, Henry coming back from just that
devastating injury,
devastating, and Tyler just persevering through. Always being number two, and could have easily, especially last year, not getting nearly the touches that Roundtree got, and apparently being healthy. So
sure,
I would put him in the SEC era. I mean, of course, we're saying this season's not even over; he hadn't even finished the year yet.
Right.
But to me, I'd put him up there.
Gosh, imagine if Beatty would have maybe entered the transfer portal after maybe last season. Obviously, that would have killed Missouri, but imagine what an impact player he could have been on, I don't know, just a really good offense, that could have been something. So thankfully he stuck around, and I think absolutely. Mizzou fans should be very grateful for that. And hopefully for senior day, we all come out and give him a big round of applause, because he definitely deserves it. So
absolutely.
Jay, thanks so much for coming on John. The show on short notice. And it's great to see you as always.
Always the same here.
Appreciate it, Jay.
Man.
Hey, ZOU.